Before we begin, share your own grandma stories in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe so we can keep these memories alive together. I should have noticed it sooner. That's what I keep telling myself now, in the quiet hours when sleep won't come and the house feels too big around me. I should have seen the signs. But that's the thing about marriage, isn't it? After 23 years, you stop looking. You trust. You assume. You fill in the blanks with the story you want to believe. My husband's name was Marcus. Is Marcus. Present tense still feels strange. Even now, we met in 1999 at a Barnes & Noble in downtown Portland. I was 24, fresh out of a relationship that had left me feeling like tissue paper in the rain. He was 26, wearing a flannel shirt that had seen better days and holding a copy of The Grapes of Wrath like it was something precious. Our hands touched reaching for the same coffee shop napkin dispenser, and he smiled at me, this slow, crooked smile that made his whole face light up. "Sorry," he'd said. "Didn't mean to invade your personal space." "It's okay," I'd replied. "I don't really believe in personal space before 9 a.m. anyway." He laughed. God, I loved his laugh. Deep and genuine. Like he meant it all the way down to his bones. 6 months later, we were married at the courthouse with 2 witnesses we pulled off the street. My mother was furious. His father didn't speak to us for a year. But we didn't care. We had each other. And we had this absolute certainty, the kind you only get when you're young and stupid and so in love it feels like breathing. We built a life. Not a fancy one, but ours. A 3-bedroom house in Beaverton with a mortgage that scared us and a backyard that flooded every winter. 2 kids. Jamie, who came when I was 28 and turned our world inside out in the best way possible, and Elise, who arrived 3 years later with her father's eyes and my stubborn streak. Marcus worked construction. Started as a laborer, worked his way up to foreman, then project manager. His hands were always rough, always scraped or bruised or sporting a new bandage. I worked at the local elementary school as a reading specialist, helping kids who struggled with words find their way into stories. We weren't rich. We weren't extraordinary. We were just us. Movie nights with popcorn made on the stove. Sunday mornings sleeping in while the kids watch cartoons. Arguments about money that we'd patch up by midnight. Vacations to the coast where we'd rent a cabin and pretend we didn't have responsibilities waiting back home. The phone thing started about 6 months ago. It was subtle at first. Just small shifts in behavior that I registered without really registering, you know? He'd check his phone more often. He'd take it with him to the bathroom. He'd angle it away from me when a notification came through. But the real tell was bedtime. For 23 years, Marcus had been a man of habit. He'd plug his phone in on his nightstand, set his alarm, and fall asleep within minutes, his breathing going deep and even while I read beside him for another hour. Our phones sat there side by side like little sentinels, screens dark, facing up toward the ceiling. Then one night in April, I noticed his phone was face down. The next night, it was face down again. The third night, I watched him turn it over deliberately before setting it down. Then he caught me looking and smiled, but there was something off about it. Something tied around his eyes. "What?" he'd asked. "Nothing," I'd said. "Just wondering why you're turning your phone over now." He shrugged. The light was bothering me. From notifications. It made sense. It was reasonable. So I let it go. But then I noticed he'd started setting a passcode. Not a big deal, lots of people have passcodes. Except Marcus never had before. In 23 years of marriage, our phones had been open books. I knew his PIN. He knew mine. We'd grab each other's phones interchangeably if ours wasn't nearby. "Hey, can you check my texts? Can you Google something for me?" Now there was a 6-digit code I didn't know. "Since when do you have a passcode?" I asked one evening while we were cooking dinner together. I tried to keep my voice light, casual. Just curious. He didn't look up from the onions he was chopping. "Work required it. Some new security protocol." "Boring stuff." "Oh," I said. "That makes sense." But it didn't. Not really. He was a project manager for a construction company, not a CIA operative. What kind of security protocol required a personal phone lock? I told myself I was being paranoid. Marriage advice columns and talk shows had rotted my brain with worst-case scenarios. This was Marcus. My Marcus. The man who still held my hand during movies. Who kissed my forehead every morning before he left for work. Who remembered that I liked my coffee with 2 sugars and a splash of half and half, even when he was exhausted and barely coherent. But the doubts had planted themselves, and doubts are like weeds. You can ignore them, but they keep growing. I started watching him more carefully. Not obsessively, or at least, I told myself it wasn't obsessive. I just paid attention. He was on his phone more. Not constantly, but enough that I noticed. Quick checks throughout the evening. A slight smile sometimes when he reads something. Once, I walked into the living room and caught him deleting something, his thumb moving fast across the screen before he looked up and saw me. "Hey," he'd said, perfectly normal. "Didn't hear you come in. What are you doing?" I asked, just clearing out some work emails. Inbox was getting out of hand. Everything he said made sense. Everything had an explanation. But it felt like I was watching our life through a window that had been smudged just slightly. Enough to distort the image without fully obscuring it. The kids noticed too. Though they didn't say anything directly. Jamie, 21 now and home from college for the summer, mentioned it over breakfast one Saturday. "Dad's been on his phone a lot lately." "Has he?" I said, trying to sound unconcerned while my heart picked up speed. "Yeah. I asked him to help me with my car last week and he kept stopping to check his texts." It was weird. Elise, 18 and about to head off to community college in the fall, was more direct. "Is Dad having an affair?" I nearly dropped the plate I was holding. "What? No, why would you say that?" She shrugged, scrolling through her own phone with the casual brutality only teenagers can manage. "I don't know. He's being weird, secretive." "Isn't that what middle-aged men do when they're having affairs?" "Your father is not having an affair," I said firmly, though my stomach had turned to ice. "Okay," Elise said, clearly unconvinced. "If you say so, but the seed was planted. Or maybe it had been there all along, and Elise had just watered it." That night, I lay in bed beside Marcus and watched him turn his phone face down on the nightstand. Watched him set the alarm. Watched him settle into his pillow with a contented sigh. "Marcus," I said softly, "is everything okay?" He turned to look at me, his face half in shadow. "Yeah, of course." "Why?" "I don't know. You seem different lately." "Different how?" I hesitated. How did I explain it without sounding accusatory? Without sounding crazy? "I guess I just feel like we haven't been connecting as much. You're on your phone a lot. You seem distracted." He reached over and took my hand. His palm was warm and familiar, calloused in all the places I knew by heart. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. Work's been intense. We're behind on the Hawthorne project and the client is breathing down my neck. I'll try to be more present." "Okay," I said. "I'd like that." He kissed me, soft and sweet, and rolled over to sleep. I stared at the ceiling for hours. The thing about trust is that it's like a glass sculpture. Beautiful and delicate, and once you start looking for cracks, you see them everywhere. I started doing things I'd never done before. Shameful things. Things that made me feel like a stranger in my own skin. I'd accidentally walk by when he was texting, trying to catch a glimpse of the screen. He'd lock it before I could see anything. I'd suggest we look something up together, hoping he'd hand me his unlocked phone. He'd Google it himself instead. Once, when he was in the shower, I tried to guess his passcode. His birthday, my birthday, our anniversary, the kids' birthdays. Nothing worked. After the 5th failed attempt, I put the phone down like it had burned me, terrified he'd come out and catch me. I felt disgusting. This wasn't who I was. I didn't snoop. I didn't spy. I trusted my husband, except I didn't anymore. And I couldn't pinpoint exactly when that had changed. My best friend Veronica noticed something was wrong when we met for coffee in early July. We'd been friends since high school, and she could read me like a billboard. "Spill," she said, before I'd even taken a sip of my latte. "Spill what?" "Whatever's eating you. You look like you haven't slept in a week." I hadn't, but I didn't want to say it out loud. Saying it out loud made it real, made it something I'd have to confront instead of just worry about in the dark. "It's nothing," I said. "Just stressed about Elise leaving for school." Veronica gave me a look that said she wasn't buying it. "Try again." So I told her. Not everything, but enough. The phone, the passcode, the secrecy, the feeling that my husband was somewhere else even when he was sitting right next to me. She listened without interrupting, which was unlike her. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Do you think he's cheating?" she finally asked. The question hung between us like smoke. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me thinks it's impossible. This is Marcus. He's not that guy. But part of me wonders." Veronica finished. "Yeah. Have you asked him directly?" "How?" "Hey, honey, are you having an affair because you locked your phone?" It sounds insane. It's not insane to want transparency from your husband. But what if I'm wrong? What if there's a perfectly innocent explanation and I've just created this huge problem out of nothing? Veronica reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Then you have a conversation and clear the air. But you can't keep doing this to yourself. This limbo is killing you. I can see it." She was right. I knew she was right. But I was terrified. Terrified of what I might find. Terrified that asking the question would detonate something I couldn't put back together. So I did nothing. I just kept watching, kept wondering, kept dying a little bit every time he turned that phone face down. August came with a heat wave that turned our little house into an oven. The kind of heat that makes everything feel urgent and irritable, where tempers run short and patience evaporates like water on hot pavement. Marcus was working longer hours. At least, that's what he said. The Hawthorne project had expanded, added new phases, run into complications. He'd leave at 6 in the morning and sometimes not come home until 8 at night. When he did come home, he looked exhausted, not just tired, hollowed out. "Maybe you should take some time off," I suggested one evening as he pushed his dinner around his plate, barely eating. "You're running yourself into the ground." "Can't," he said. "Not right now. Too much at stake." "More at stake than your health? Your family?" He looked up at me, and for just a second, I saw something flicker across his face. Something that looked almost like guilt. But then it was gone, replaced by that tired smile. "It'll ease up soon," he said. "I promise." But it didn't ease up. If anything, it got worse. He started coming home even later. He started making phone calls from the car before he came inside. Conversations he'd end abruptly when I came out to greet him. He started taking his phone into his home office and closing the door, something he'd never done in all our years of marriage. The kids noticed. Jamie started making excuses to visit friends instead of staying home. Elise got quiet, withdrawing into her room with her earbuds in, building walls between herself and the tension that had settled over our house like fog. And me? I was unraveling. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything except the 1,000 possible explanations running through my head. Each one worse than the last. He was having an affair. Definitely an affair. Probably with someone from work. Someone younger. Someone who didn't have stretch marks and gray roots and crow's feet around her eyes. Or maybe it wasn't an affair. Maybe it was something worse. Gambling? Debt? Some kind of illegal activity? Maybe he'd gotten involved in something dangerous and was trying to protect us by keeping it secret. Or maybe, and this thought scared me most of all, maybe he'd just fallen out of love. Maybe he was staying out of obligation, going through the motions while his heart was somewhere else entirely. Maybe that phone held evidence of an exit strategy. A new life he was planning without me. I started having panic attacks. Small ones at first, just moments where my heart would race and the room would feel too small. Then bigger ones, where I'd lock myself in the bathroom and cry silently so no one would hear, my chest so tight I thought I might actually be dying. Veronica wanted me to confront him. My mother, who I'd finally broken down and called, wanted me to hire a private investigator. Even Elise, in her teenage wisdom, told me I needed to just rip the band-aid off. But I couldn't, because as long as I didn't ask, as long as I didn't know for certain, I could still pretend. I could still live in the maybe. The moment I asked was the moment everything either got better or fell completely apart. And I wasn't ready for either outcome. The breaking point came on a Thursday night in mid-August. Marcus came home at almost 9, looking more exhausted than I'd ever seen him. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair was sticking up on one side, And there were dark circles under his eyes that looked like bruises. "Sorry," he said, dropping his keys on the counter. "Traffic was hell." I'd heard that excuse so many times it had lost all meaning. "Your dinner's in the microwave, thanks. I'll eat in a bit. I need to make a quick call first. Marcus, just 5 minutes, I promise." He disappeared into his office and closed the door. Something in me snapped. Maybe it was the accumulated weight of 6 months of secrecy. Maybe it was the heat. Maybe it was just that I'd reached the absolute limit of what I could tolerate. I walked to his office door and tried the handle. Locked. He'd never locked it before. "Marcus?" I called through the door. No answer. I could hear his voice, low and urgent, but couldn't make out the words. "Marcus." Louder this time. The door opened. He stood there with his phone in his hand, his face unreadable. "Can this wait? I'm in the middle of something." "No," I said. "It can't wait." Something in my voice must have registered because his expression shifted. "Okay, let me just now, Marcus. We need to talk now." He said something into the phone. "I'll call you back," and ended the call. Then he looked at me with those tired eyes, waiting. I'd rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times in my head. All the calm, rational things I'd say. All the careful questions I'd ask. But standing there in the hallway, looking at this man I'd loved for more than half my life, all of that evaporated. What the hell is going on? The words came out sharp, almost angry. "And don't tell me nothing. Don't insult me by pretending everything is fine when you've been acting like a stranger for months." "I'm not." "Yes, you are." The phone, Marcus. The secrecy. The late nights. The locked office. "Talk to me like I'm your wife instead of someone you're trying to hide things from." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he walked past me into the kitchen, and for a terrifying second I thought he was just going to leave. But instead, he leaned against the counter, his head down, his hands gripping the edge. "You're right," he said quietly. My heart stopped. "Right about what?" "I have been keeping something from you." The world tilted. This was it. The moment I'd been dreading. The affair. The secret life. The end of everything I'd built. "I'm listening," I managed to say, though my voice sounded like it was coming from very far away. He looked up at me, and I saw tears in his eyes. Marcus never cried. In 23 years, I'd seen him cry maybe 3 times. Once when Jamie was born. Once at his mother's funeral. Once during a particularly emotional scene in a movie he'd never admit had affected him. "I don't know how to say this," he said. "I've been trying to find the right words for months and I can't. Just say it. Please. Whatever it is. Just tell me." He took a breath. "I'm sick." The words didn't make sense at first. I heard them, but they didn't connect to anything, like he'd spoken in a foreign language. "What?" "I'm sick," he repeated. "I've been sick for about 8 months now. That's what's been going on. That's why everything's been different." "Sick how?" My mind was racing, trying to rearrange all the pieces I'd been fitting into one picture into an entirely different one. "Like, you have the flu? An infection?" "No," his voice broke. "It's more serious than that." The kitchen floor felt unstable beneath me. "How serious?" "I need you to sit down." "I don't want to sit down. I want you to tell me what's happening." But my legs felt weak, so I sat at the kitchen table anyway. Marcus sat across from me, and in that moment, I could see how much weight he'd lost, how gray his skin looked, how much older he seemed than he had just a few months ago. How had I missed that? How had I been so focused on suspicion that I'd missed my husband literally wasting away in front of me? "Last February," he said, "I started feeling tired. More than usual. And my back was hurting. I figured it was just getting older, working too hard. You know how it is." I nodded, though I couldn't speak. But it got worse. By March, I could barely get out of bed some mornings. The pain was constant. So I went to the doctor. Just a checkup, I thought. Get some muscle relaxers, maybe physical therapy. Marcus, they ran tests. A lot of tests. It took almost 2 months to get all the results, all the biopsies, all the imaging. And then in May, they confirmed it. He stopped. The silence stretched so long I thought I might scream. "Confirmed what?" I whispered. "Multiple myeloma. It's a blood cancer." It affects the plasma cells in your bone marrow. The world went very quiet. I could hear the refrigerator humming, could hear a car passing outside, could hear my own heartbeat, loud and insistent in my ears. Cancer, I said. The word felt foreign in my mouth. Yeah. You have cancer. Yeah. Since May. You've known since May that you have cancer, and you didn't tell me. He flinched. I wanted to. God, I wanted to tell you every single day. But I was trying to figure out what it meant first. What the treatment options were. What the prognosis was. I didn't want to scare you until I had all the information. Scare me? My voice was rising. You didn't want to scare me? Marcus, I've been scared for months. I thought I stopped, unable to even say it out loud now that it seemed so stupid and selfish and small. I know what you thought, he said softly. I saw you watching me. I knew you were suspicious. And part of me thought maybe it was better that way. If you thought I was having an affair, at least you'd be angry instead of. He gestured helplessly. Instead of what? Instead of looking at me the way you're looking at me right now. Like I'm dying. The word hung between us. Dying. Was he dying? I couldn't ask. Didn't want to know. Needed to know immediately. Tell me everything, I said. No more secrets. I need to know everything. So he told me. He told me about the diagnosis. Multiple myeloma, stage 3. The cancer was in his bones. His blood, multiplying in places I couldn't see but that were slowly destroying him from the inside out. He told me about the doctors. The oncologist, Dr. Patricia Chen, who had been the one to deliver the diagnosis in May. The hematologist, the pain management specialist. All these professionals I'd never met who were now intimately involved in my husband's body, his survival, his future. He told me about the phone calls, not to a mistress, but to his medical team, to his insurance company, fighting about coverage, to his boss, trying to figure out how to keep working while undergoing treatment, to support groups where he'd listen to other people's stories and try to find hope in the statistics. He told me about the texts, messages from his brother in Seattle, who he'd confided in first because he needed someone to talk to who wasn't me, who wouldn't look at him with devastation in their eyes. Messages from coworkers who knew and were trying to be supportive. Messages from the hospital about appointments, test results, treatment schedules. The passcode on his phone wasn't to hide an affair. It was to hide medical records, prescriptions, research about survival rates and treatment options and experimental therapies. Things he'd been looking at late at night, trying to understand what was happening to his body while I slept beside him. Oblivious. The locked phone at night, I said. Understanding dawning like a sick sunrise. You were researching, looking up symptoms and treatments. I couldn't sleep, he admitted. The pain was bad, and my mind wouldn't shut off. I'd read about the disease, about what to expect, about how long. He trailed off. How long what? He met my eyes. How long I have. The bottom fell out of my stomach. And? How long do you have? It depends. With treatment, it could be years, 5, maybe 10 if we're lucky. There are people who live much longer with this. But without treatment, he shrugged. Months, maybe a year. So we do treatment. Obviously, we do treatment. We've already started. That's where I've been. The late nights at work were chemotherapy appointments. The phone calls were consultations with specialists. I've been doing this for 3 months now, trying to handle it on my own because I'm an idiot who thought he was protecting you. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My husband had been fighting cancer alone for 3 months while I'd been suspecting him of infidelity, while I'd been playing detective instead of being his partner. I'm so sorry, he said. And now he was crying for real, tears streaming down his face. I'm so sorry I lied to you. I'm sorry I made you worry. I'm sorry for all of it. I couldn't figure out how to tell you that I might be dying. How do you tell someone that? How do you look at your wife and your kids and say, hey, I have cancer, and it might kill me? I stood up from the table and went to him, wrapped my arms around him and held on as tight as I could. Like if I just held tight enough, I could keep him here, keep him whole, keep him alive. We stood there in the kitchen for a long time, both of us crying, both of us holding on. When we finally pulled apart, I wiped my eyes and took a shaky breath. We need to tell the kids. I know. And I need to meet Dr. Chen. I need to understand the treatment plan, the prognosis, all of it. Okay. And Marcus? No more secrets. I don't care how scary it is. We face this together. That's what marriage means. He nodded, reaching up to cup my face with one of his rough, familiar hands. Together. He agreed. We told Jamie and Elise that night, called them both into the living room and sat them down like we were going to announce we were selling the house or getting a dog. Elise knew immediately. Dad's sick, she said before Marcus could even start talking. That's what this has been about. I should have guessed. Jamie went very pale. Sick how? Marcus told them the same story he'd told me. I watched our children's faces as they processed the information. Watched them age years in the space of minutes. Watched them realize that their father, their strong, reliable, always their father was vulnerable, was human, might not always be here. Elise cried quietly. Jamie got angry, demanding to know why Marcus hadn't told us sooner, why he'd kept something this big a secret. It was the same anger I'd felt, the same sense of betrayal mixed with love mixed with terror. I was wrong, Marcus said simply. I thought I was protecting you. But I was just protecting myself. I was scared to admit it out loud because that made it real. We stayed up until almost 2 in the morning talking, asking questions, making plans. The kids wanted to know everything, what the treatment was like, what the side effects were, what we should expect in the coming months. Marcus answered as honestly as he could. Yes, the chemotherapy made him nauseous. Yes, he was losing weight because he had no appetite. Yes, he was exhausted all the time. Yes, there was a good chance the treatment would work. But no, there were no guarantees. When we finally went to bed, Marcus fell asleep almost immediately, like a weight had been lifted just by telling the truth. I lay awake beside him, watching him breathe, cataloging every detail like I was seeing him for the first time. The gray in his hair I'd never really noticed. The new hollowness in his cheeks. The way his breathing hitched slightly, like even sleeping hurt. How had I missed this? How had I been so wrapped up in my own suspicions that I'd failed to see my husband was suffering? The guilt was overwhelming. But beneath the guilt was something else. Determination. If Marcus was fighting, then I would fight with him. We'd fight together. The next few months were a blur of hospital visits and treatment cycles and learning a new vocabulary. MGUS, bortezomib, stem cell transplant. Words that became as familiar as our own names. I went with Marcus to every appointment. Sat beside him during the long chemotherapy sessions, holding his hand while the drugs dripped into his veins. Learned to manage his pain medications. To cook foods that wouldn't upset his stomach. To be his advocate when he was too tired to advocate for himself. The kids stepped up too. Jamie came home from college every other weekend, taking over yard work and house repairs that Marcus couldn't do anymore. Elise postponed her community college plans, deciding to take classes online so she could be home to help. You don't have to do this, Marcus told her. You should be starting your own life. I am, Elise said. This is my life. You're my life. And I'm not going anywhere. We became a unit in a way we hadn't been before. Not just a family, but a team with a common purpose. Keeping Marcus alive. And slowly, so slowly, I almost didn't dare believe it, the treatment started working. His cancer markers began dropping. The pain lessened. He started gaining weight back. Dr. Chen was cautiously optimistic, though she warned us that multiple myeloma was a chronic disease. It could be managed, but not cured. There would be good days and bad days. Remissions and relapses. We take it one day at a time, she said. That's all anyone can do. One day at a time became our mantra. There were hard days. Days when Marcus was so sick from the treatment that he couldn't get out of bed. Days when he'd look at me with such despair in his eyes that I'd have to leave the room before I broke down. Days when I'd lie awake at night, calculating how many years we might have left and whether they'd be enough. But there were good days too. Days when Marcus felt strong enough to take a walk around the neighborhood with me. Days when we'd all eat dinner together and almost forget that cancer was lurking in the background. Days when he'd smile at me across a room and I'd remember why I fell in love with him in the first place. About a year after the diagnosis, 9 Months after I'd finally learned the truth, Marcus achieved what Dr. Chen called very good partial remission. The cancer was still there, but it was under control, manageable. He could live like this, possibly for years. We celebrated with a trip to the coast, just the four of us. The same cabin we'd been renting since the kids were little. We walked on the beach and ate too much seafood and stayed up late playing board games, and it felt almost normal, almost like before. One evening, Marcus and I walked down to the water alone. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that looked too beautiful to be real. We stood at the edge of the surf, letting the cold water rush over our bare feet, and he put his arm around me. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what?" "For putting you through hell. For lying to you. For making you think I was cheating when really I was just terrified." I leaned into him. "I'm sorry too. For not seeing it sooner. For not trusting that you'd never hurt me like that. You had every reason to be suspicious. I gave you every reason." "No," I said firmly. "I should have known. Should have seen past the surface. After 23 years, I should have known you better than that." He kissed the top of my head. "We both made mistakes. But we're here now. That's what matters." We stood there in the surf until the sun disappeared below the horizon and the air turned cold. Until our feet were numb and the first stars were beginning to appear overhead. "I love you," I said. "I've loved you since the day we met. And I'll love you until the day I die." "I love you too," he said. "And I'm not planning on dying anytime soon. I've got at least another 50 years of annoying you ahead of me." I laughed through tears. I hadn't realized I was crying. "Promise?" "Promise." It's been 2 years since that night on the beach. 2 years since Marcus told me the truth about the locked phone and the secrets and the fear that had been consuming him. The cancer is still there. It always will be. But it's stable, controlled. He goes in for treatments every few months, and we hold our breath until the test results come back showing the disease is still in check. We're different now. All of us. The crisis changed us in ways both obvious and subtle. Marcus is more open, more willing to share his fears and struggles instead of trying to shoulder them alone. He goes to therapy now, dealing with the trauma of diagnosis and the ongoing anxiety of living with a chronic disease. I'm less trusting of surface explanations, more insistent on digging deeper, on asking the hard questions, on not accepting fine as an answer when something clearly isn't fine. The kids are closer to us than ever. Jamie calls at least once a week from college, checking in on his dad but also just to talk. Elise, still at home and taking classes online, has become Marcus's partner in managing his health, reminding him to take his medications and accompanying him to appointments when I can't. We're a family that knows how fragile life is, how quickly everything can change, how important it is to say I love you and mean it, because you never know which conversation might be your last. But we're also a family that knows how strong we are, how much we can endure when we do it together, how love, real, deep, tested love, can survive anything. The phone thing seems almost silly now. All those months I spent convinced Marcus was hiding an affair, when really he was hiding something much worse and much more human. He still locks his phone sometimes, but now it's because he's researching vacation destinations or looking up birthday present ideas for me. And when I ask what he's doing, he shows me. Every time. Because we learned the hard way that secrets, even well-intentioned ones, can poison a marriage just as surely as betrayal. Last month was our 25th anniversary. Marcus planned a surprise party, inviting our friends and family to a restaurant downtown. I pretended to be surprised, even though Elise had accidentally spoiled it 2 weeks earlier. During the dinner, Marcus stood up to make a toast. I watched him, this man who had survived cancer, who had fought his way back from the edge, who was standing here alive and smiling despite everything, and felt my heart swell with love so intense it hurt. 25 years ago, he said, his voice carrying across the room, I married the most incredible woman I've ever met. And for 25 years, she's put up with my stubbornness, my terrible jokes, and my habit of leaving socks everywhere except the hamper. Everyone laughed. I rolled my eyes affectionately. A couple years ago, he continued, and his voice got more serious, I made some mistakes. Big ones. I kept secrets that I shouldn't have kept. I tried to protect the people I love by shutting them out, and instead I almost lost everything that matters. The room had gone quiet. Everyone knew the story, or at least the outline of it. But my wife, Marcus, looked directly at me. My incredible, patient, stubborn wife. She fought for us. She didn't give up on me even when I'd given up on myself. She reminded me what marriage means, what family means. He raised his glass. So here's to Emma, to 25 years of putting up with me, and hopefully at least 25 more. To the woman who saved my life in more ways than one. I love you more than words can say. To Emma. Everyone chorused, raising their glasses. I wiped my eyes, stood up, and kissed my husband. I love you too, I whispered against his lips. Every difficult, complicated, wonderful part of you. That night, after everyone had gone home and we were getting ready for bed, I watched Marcus plug in his phone on the nightstand. He set its screen up, right next to mine, like he'd done for 23 years before everything changed. No secrets, he said, catching me watching. No secrets, I agreed. He climbed into bed beside me, and I curled into him, my head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Strong, steady, still here. What are you thinking about? He asked. Everything, I said. Nothing. How lucky we are. How scared I was. How grateful I am that you're here. I'm not going anywhere, he said. You can't promise that. No, he admitted. But I can promise to be here for as long as possible. And I can promise never to lock you out again, no matter how scary things get. That's all I need, I said. We lay there in the dark, holding each other. Two people who had been tested and broken and rebuilt stronger than before. The locked phone had nearly destroyed us. But in a strange way, it had also saved us. It had forced conversations we needed to have. It had stripped away the comfortable assumptions and made us really see each other's vulnerabilities and fears and all. Would I trade the last 2 years if I could? Would I go back to the comfortable ignorance of not knowing my husband was sick? No, because that comfort was an illusion. The cancer was there whether I knew about it or not. The locked phone was just a symptom. The real disease was the silence, the isolation, the belief that we had to face our hardest struggles alone. Now we face them together. Every test result, every setback, every victory, we face it as a team. And that's worth more than all the easy, unlocked days that came before. Marcus's breathing has gone slow, and even beside me, he's fallen asleep, like he does every night now, exhausted but peaceful. I watch him for a moment longer. This man I've loved for half my life. This man I almost lost without even knowing I was losing him. Then I reach over and place my hand on his chest, feeling it rise and fall with each breath. Still here, still alive, still ours. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges. There will be more treatments, more tests, more waiting for results that will either bring relief or devastation. But tonight, in this moment, we're okay. We're together, and that's enough. I close my eyes and let sleep take me, my hand still resting over my husband's heart, counting each beat like the precious gift it is, because that's what I learned from the locked phone, from the secrets, from the fear and the truth that followed. Every moment is a gift. Every breath is borrowed time. And the only way to survive is to hold tight to the people you love and never ever let go.